Hi everyone, my name's Kanína.
And I'm Tracy.
Today we have Loka, who's going to talk about Old Norse Sorcery. Hi Loka, how are you doing?
Good. I'm feeling good.
Good. How's your day going?
Well, I rescued a bunny yesterday, so it's very interesting today.
Oh, good.
Oh, where'd you find the bunny at?
Actually, he was supposed to be a meat rabbit, and I said, no! So I took him.
I'm glad you did.
Now, are you keeping him as a pet?
I'm not really sure yet. I've worked with rabbits for a long time. I've had them as pets a majority of my life, but I also work with them on a spiritual level as well, so I feel maybe a little more empathy for them than I do about other things, so I'm not sure if he's going to stay with me, but I'm really loving him so far, so he might be stuck with me.
Oh, that's nice.
That's your good deed of the week.
That's awesome. So what we want to talk to for our listeners, and I'm really excited about the show because we've had requests before for Norse traditions, but what you're going to talk about today is a very specific tradition. And if you can introduce to the listeners who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into the Norse sorcery.
Okay.
Well,
I'm Loka, as everyone already knows. And I practice, a variety of different Norse sorcery, like ocular divination. You could basically call me a seeress. I also work with runes, and I work a type of magic called Seiðr. And I also do a singing of runes, which is called galdr. And basically, I've been doing anything witchy I can get my hands on in those realms for about 13 years now.
Nice.
My lucky number.
Yeah, 13 is a good number.
And so what kind of drew you to this?
Well, I started quite young figuring this out. I was about 10. I came from a very Christian family, and I didn't have any problem with that. I didn't relate to it. It didn't make me feel anything. And from a very young age, I always said to people, I worship trees and stuff like that. And then probably around the age of 11, I found out there were other people who did that. And they were called pagans. So I was like, oh, cool, I'm a pagan, and I didn't even know it. But then after a while, I was like, I feel like I'm lacking something. I feel like I need deities. I need something, that I can talk to and communicate with and stuff like that. So I decided I was going to hunt for some gods, I guess. And I started with my own heritage. I figured, well, we're Vikings. What did Vikings believe? And then as soon as I started reading about it, I took the resource books from my library in my school, right? That's all we had at the time. And they hadn't even been checked out since the 80s. So wow. I was like, yeah, these are mine. And ever since then, it's just been so natural, and it's evolved so much. And it's always changing, but always still kind of staying the same. But I've been doing this for a long time now, and it just clicked. And it's been awesome ever since.
For our listeners, can you explain what Old Norse sorcery is?
Sure. Well, there's a couple different aspects. I'm trying to think. What would you like me to talk about in particular?
I can't pronounce it, but I think it's called Seiðr.
Oh, Seiðr?
Seiðr?
Yeah. Well, it's there's a couple different ways to pronounce it. The way I choose to pronounce it is more of the Icelandic way, which is, it's kind of like cider, like apple cider, but it's like Seiðr. You kind of get a roll on the tongue.
Yeah, I could do that. Seiðr.
Seiðr?
Yeah, there you go.
And what's the history of it?
Well, that's going to be, it's just so long to explain.
That's okay.
Seiðr as a practice for people was really sort of around the Iron Age in Scandinavia. But I think the most important mentions of it are actually in the Poetic Edda. The first poem is, it's called Völva, which is the divination of the witch, or the prophecy of the witch. And a big part of Seiðr is it's the life, death, and rebirth cycle. And also Odin performed Seiðr when he was hanging on Yggdrasil.
For our listeners, sorry to interrupt, but for our listeners, who is Odin? Because some of our listeners may not know.
Oh, yes, okay. Well, Odin is basically, he's a god of war, he's a god of poetry, he's a god of ecstasy. He collects, he has a hall as well as Freyja, who keeps half of the dead, and he keeps half of the dead. But basically, he is the top god in the Norse pantheon, and he's known as very wise. He comes in many forms, the Wanderer, and the battle fury, and everything like that. So he's a multi-dimensional deity. He could be a path of his own. Honestly, there's so much to him. But he also he used Seiðr. He was taught Seiðr actually by Freyja, and it's typically a female practice. It wasn't really common for men to do it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No.
No. Well, actually, men who practiced, they were called ergi, which means unmanly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And also, being called ergi was considered a really big insult. There were many blood feuds because somebody called somebody else unmanly. So.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I was going to tell you about in Völuspá, which is the prophecy of the witch. And in this poem, she's explaining the beginning of the world and how it all happened. And then Odin is the one questioning her, and he's asking her about the future and everything like that. And there's a line here that I'd like to read you, if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
All right. So this is from Völuspá, and this basically is an example of Seiðr. So she says, I remember the first war in the world, when Gullveig was hoist on the spears, and in the High One's hall they burned her. 3 times they burned, and 3 times born, often not seldom, yet she still lives. She was called Seiðr, Bright One, when she came to the settlements. A far-seeing Völva, caster of spells, cunning in magic. Ecstatically she performed it, and she was always loved by wicked women. So in this line of the poem, what they've done is they've burnt the Völva Gullveig, and she hasn't died. She has been burnt and then come back, and then burnt and come back. And part of Seiðr is using it to escape death, to not die. It's a way of overcoming it. Now, in modern times, maybe not so much, but Gullveig was an especially talented carrier of the wand, which is also another term for a Völva. So she used it to not die, and actually that's what got Odin into the whole idea of it. He was like, hey, this lady's pretty tough. I kind of want to do what she's doing,
That's interesting. For our listeners, what's the Völva?
Völva is a word that it can mean lady with a staff-carrying lady, a wand-carrying lady. The Völva was basically a witch, and she lived outside of the community, and you could tell she was the Völva because of her staff, which was often decorated with a lot of gems, and really it was pretty blinged out. It was a very nice looking status piece. It was wealthy in appearance because she was sought after and paid very well for her prophecy. And she would live outside of the village or the community because she didn't want to become biased. So she stayed mostly on the outskirts, and then would come in and travel and perform divinations, trance, poisoning oneself with a substance like henbane, which is a plant, was common. They would use it to speak to the gods, speak to those who had died, to get answers. They could divine the outcome of war. They could tell you, when would be the best to start this crop or that crop. They were healers. They worked all the magic. And they had the high seat where they would perform their divinations as well. So she was the staff-carrying seeress of epicness.
And what was her relation? Because you mentioned the Vikings. Did she have a connection with the Vikings?
Yes, well, she would have been Nordic. Some of them actually were Slavic, but most that I know of are in Scandinavia. It's a Scandinavian practice, and she would have been around. Well, the Völva would have probably mostly been in charge in the Bronze Age, and then as stuff sort of progressed, she became less known. But she would have still been around in the Viking Age as well. There's actually many Viking Age sagas that still speak about the Völva and describe what she looked like and what she wore. And she had gloves that were lined with white cat skin and things like that. Like they were still present even when these things were being written.
Really?
So. Mm-hmm.
And if someone wanted to do more research on the Völva, where should they start? Like, what would you recommend?
Well, most people would find Wikipedia a pretty good start. And honestly, the Wikipedia article is really not that bad. It does cover, it's very, very basic. It's not going to necessarily teach you how to be this. That's more of something passed on. And I mean, I've been doing this for so long and I have so much information at this point. But Wikipedia would not be a terrible place to just get an overall idea of what it is. But there's a lady that I know of who's amazing, and her name's Maria. She's known as Lady of the Labyrinth, and she's also a scholar of Old Norse, not just the language, but also of the lore and the poems and the Edda and everything like that as well. And she has a lot of really great information, and there's not many people that I would recommend like I do her, but she's really fantastic. And I can give you guys her website if you want.
Sure. Is she in Nova Scotia or?
Pardon?
Is she in Nova Scotia?
No, she's not in Nova Scotia. She's actually in Norway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. If you want to give out her information, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll send that along to you. I love Maria. Maria's website is Freya, Freya, ladyofthelabyrinth.com, and she also has a YouTube channel. She makes fantastic videos. She has a series on the hidden messages in Old Norse, which is what Old Norse is all about. It's all coded. And it's youtube.com/user/ladyofthelabyrinth.
Oh, thank you. And for those who are listening, we will actually post this link on Eye of the East Coast Facebook page. Now, just going back to the Völva, because I haven't, this is the first I've ever heard about this. Is this very well known in the culture?
Modern or ancient?
I guess maybe both. Maybe start with ancient and then maybe work
ancient definitely. In most writing we have, even in the sagas from Iceland even, all the great tales about the warriors, and you hear so much focus about the warriors and how they achieved this and that and how great they were. But what's not really mentioned is how the reason they achieved so much is because they sought out a witch. So behind every great warrior was a great witch.
Interesting.
That is fascinating. And what was her status in society? Because I know she kind of lived out on the outskirts of the town. But
yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's good.
Yeah, she did. She was known for living on the outside of the town. She was also known as wand-wed, which meant, she was mostly married to her craft. She didn't tend to take a husband or to have children. It was a solitary woman practicing her craft. But when she came in, she was given the high seat. There was normally a procession that came with her, like to follow her and welcome her in. And very often kings were known to give up their seat to the Völva because she was doing them a favor. She was providing the information they needed to be successful, especially in terms of war. where she presides over the whole life, death, rebirth cycle. She's very useful in times of war. So, I mean, in terms of status, a jarl or a king would have given up their seat to the Völva.
And in modern time now, so that's ancient now, in modern time.
In modern time, modern heathenry is a far cry from what it was in the past. It's sort of, the focus has been sort of taken away from the magic and the power, and especially the sacred feminine principles. And it's really just sort of been just made into something that's mostly about the male deities, and it's very masculine based now, which there's nothing wrong. It's just that's not true to the culture. It was much more balanced than that. There was a greater balance between the masculine and the feminine. And now we're just really looking at a modern religion based off of an ancient one that is really just not true to the ancient ways of it. So the Völva is pretty much, I wouldn't say she's gone. There are still some, and there are definitely some who don't know they are, but they are. But it's not really a focus now, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think with all that's been going on in this world, we kind of need a little more of that magic around. We need more people doing that stuff.
And I think the balance is important too. That's just like,
but, it was definitely much more balanced in ancient times than it is now, for sure.
And I have a question going back to behind every warrior, there's a witch. When you say warrior, because I just want to go back to the Vikings, because I want to know, because we know that they would go to them for if there was a war or something coming out there, but what about spiritual practice? Was there anything that, like, their spiritual path, would the Vol-vah have anything to do with that?
I mean, she would. The way it sort of worked for warriors is they would, there's blot, which translates to blood. It's a blood sacrifice, and men would perform that. They would basically perform a sacrifice in terms of, they wanted better things to come to them, or they would make offerings to idols of the gods, hoping to earn more, to trade better. But magic really was mostly a woman's domain, and if men needed something done, they would seek out Sidkona, which is basically a magic woman, a magic wife, Kona means wife, or a Völva, which is practically a Sidkona, but a little bit different, a little bit older. But in terms of having any magical things done, most people would go to someone like this. But also, in the Viking Age, even the mundane was seen as magical. They would have, Vhard-lokkr. It would be a type of song that they would sing. So they would have a vardlokkur to call in the animals, and it was still very magical, and everything that women did was transformational. So even, to milk the cow and churn the butter, you're transforming something, and then to get wool and to spin it and to weave it was all transformational work. So they really viewed most things as having some kind of magic in it.
And for our listeners, if they feel connected to this path, what would you recommend them start, like at home, like with everything, like everyday things they have now? What would you recommend them to start with?
Research. See, the only issue with this is there's a lot of homework, not even just in terms of being a Völva, because you can't practice that path without also knowing a lot about the Norse mythology, without knowing about the type of poetry, which was a way to transmit sacred knowledge. It was secret. Not everyone understood it. That's why it was transmitted in poetry. So you'd have to learn a lot about the poetry to understand the meanings in between the lines. And also it's learning about the deities and checking up on archaeological finds. It's really just to even get the base knowledge, because you should know about the the culture and the history and the lore and the language and the symbolism of the people at the time to truly be able to do that kind of working. So I would say your best bet is to be prepared for years and years and years of excruciating homework tasks.
No, I think that's great advice. Now, for our listeners, if they want to contact you or ask you information, how can they get a hold of you?
I have a Facebook page.
Excellent.
Perfect. And what's your Facebook page?
It's facebook.com/Vinland Volva, VINLAND VOLVA.
And are you on Twitter too?
Nope, I'm only on the Facebook. I don't know how to do the Twitter.
And you offer courses, classes?
I don't necessarily offer courses or classes. I will answer questions, but I'm really, I still have that very stubborn Old Norse attitude of, if you want something bad enough, you'll work for it, I'm a big advocate of keeping Seiðr and the role of the Völva sacred. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of mystery involved in that, and I keep it that way. Keep it secret, keep it sacred. But I have no problem answering questions or trying to help somebody out. But I have more respect for people who are willing to work really hard to get it for themselves. And that's probably just the whole Old Norse attitude anyway.
But no.
So, you got to be willing to work for it, because it doesn't just come to anybody,
That's excellent.
No, this was really great, Loka.
I learned a lot. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. And we'll definitely have you on again, because this was interesting.
Yeah, I feel like we just scratched the surface on this topic.
Oh yeah, there's so much, you guys. It's totally crazy. These were women who back in the Bronze Age just totally ruled it. They rule all aspects of living, and they helped give birth to the children, and they knew what runes to mark to ease the pains of childbirth, and it's just basically they resided over every important aspect that was at home or part of the community. So it's just, there's so much. It's crazy, and I'm glad that we have access to it for the most part. So I love it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, before we get into the readings for August 25th to September 1st, just a few other shows on EGH Radio, and the website is www.eghradio.com. You can find EGH Radio on Facebook and Twitter. Other shows are Anne's Rock Show on Mondays at 3 p.m. Atlantic, Steven's Unsigned Madness at 3 p.m. Atlantic on Wednesdays, and Chuck's show is on Wednesdays right after Steven's show at 4:30 called Boombox America. For information on Tracy and myself, we're on Facebook under Eye of the East Coast. Tracy is Reiki with a twist, and mine is just Kanína Psychic Readings. Okay, so here's the readings for August 25th to September 1st. Okay, so for Aries, the first thing that they're focusing on for you is to recognize your determination. Speak your mind and be very clear where you're coming from, because they're making me feel that someone may be hearing what they want to hear, so just speak up. Taurus, they're focusing on being disciplined and getting organized this week. This is a time to get work done. They're making me feel don't procrastinate. This is not that time. Gemini, they're making me feel this is a week for you just to have fun. There's a lot of joy coming your way this autumn, and what they're saying is to focus on what makes you happy. Cancers, they're making me feel ask yourself what inspires you, because they're showing here that the way that they're translating it is that there's a new chapter coming your way, but the new chapter doesn't become clear until November. But focus on now what inspires you and follow it. Leo, they're making me feel you guys may need more rest than normal. You may also find, too, that crowds are a bit more, the word I would use is loud. They're just making me feel you need to be home. Virgos, they're making me feel that there was a trip or transition that's very positive, but this is a time to focus on a new chapter and just also to focus on how far you've come along. Libras, they're focusing on your intuition. There's something that you may be going through a very spiritual time for the next week. I think it's longer than the week, but they're making me feel it becomes a bit more stronger. Scorpios, they're making me feel stand your ground and speak up, because what they're showing here is there may be a gentleman that you have to have put some gentle boundaries around, because his energy is he's hearing what he wants to. It's similar to Aries, but it's something just put down your foot. Sagittarius, they're focusing on connecting more with Earth, and they're also focusing on working more with the plants, the trees, and the flowers, and maybe herbal teas. Capricorn, this is a time to get organized financially because they're presenting financial healing. They're also showing an energy here where it would be really good to be strict with a budget. Aquarius, this is a week to be very clear with your communications. Make sure no one's assuming, or you're not assuming someone's truth. Be very clear and ask. They're also asking you to work a little bit more with crystals. And Pisces, they're making me feel this is a week to focus on being independent and also to let your wisdom shine. Don't underestimate your wisdom. So that's it for this week. Next week we have Judica Illis coming on. We're very excited to have her because she's going to talk about fairies and their connection to Celtic saints, and also too a little bit about how wells in Ireland and England and Scotland were considered portals with the fairies. So it's a very interesting show coming up. So I hope everyone has a great week, and we look forward to hearing from you next week. Hi everyone, my name's Kanína.
And I'm Tracy.
Today we have Loka, who's going to talk about Old Norse Sorcery. Hi Loka, how are you doing?
Good. I'm feeling good.
Good. How's your day going?
Well, I rescued a bunny yesterday, so it's very interesting today.
Oh, good.
Oh, where'd you find the bunny at?
Actually, he was supposed to be a meat rabbit, and I said, no! So I took him.
I'm glad you did.
Now, are you keeping him as a pet?
I'm not really sure yet. I've worked with rabbits for a long time. I've had them as pets a majority of my life.